My message this morning is based on Luke 24, the gospel for this day, verses 36 through 39. And I have to tell you, as a lead-in to my message this morning, I was in Florida with my wife about a week and a half ago, and I was enjoying about a week of 80-degree temperature while you were all suffering up here, up north, and enjoying every minute of it. And we walked into my daughter's home. One of the things that I noticed right off was that she has these pictures, and she probably buys them at Home Goods or someplace, and they all have religious sayings on them. And one of them, two of those signs were in her bedroom that came off of the foyer in the living area of her home, and you could see inside the bedroom, and there are two songs. And it says, "Be still, my soul, all is well." And I thought to myself, wow, that's powerful. Every night when you go to bed and you look up and say, "Be still, my soul, everything is well," even if your day is down, things haven't gone well. And I said to my daughter, that must be a powerful lift for you as you try to close your eyes, knowing that you had a very tough day, and you could look up on your wall and say, "All is well, be still, my soul." You know, when you look at what happened here in the gospel, here were 11 disciples gathered in the city of Jerusalem in some room. It was the evening of the resurrection, and they were all trying to comprehend what had happened in the last several days. Here was a master they had been with for several years, and he had been found on a cross, and they all fled. And now they came back to this room on the resurrection evening, and they had been told by two of the disciples, and there were about 70 what they were known as apostles in those days. Cephas was one of them, as Luke describes it to us. He had seen Jesus, and they were walking away from the tomb area, and Jesus appeared to them, and they finally recognized him, that he was alive, and they run back to where the disciples, the 11 disciples are, and they say, "He's alive." And they sat there, and they thought to themselves, that can't be. But it must be, because two of them saw him. And suddenly, as they were there, Jesus appeared to them right out of the thin air. And he looks at them and he said, "Peace be with you, my brothers. Do not be troubled. Don't be terrified. Don't be fearful. Don't be doubtful. It is I. Look at the 5 wounds in my body and my hands and my feet and my side. Touch me. Come and see." Let me help you work through those words for a few moments in my message this morning, relying on our faith to believe that God in Jesus has always been a God of touch in our life, every single moment of our life that we wake up. I'm going to call it this morning an Easter touch. I've always enjoyed the art world, and always enjoyed going down to the Art Institute and looking at all the wonderful paintings throughout the great masters of artwork. And I've been fascinated over the years in my ministry to study some of the frescoes that are in the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Have any of you been there to the Sistine Chapel to see those? They're painted by Michelangelo. There are 9 frescoes. And he's one of the most accomplished painters in all of history, so some say. And they're so real. And I want to show you one here this morning. It's called the creation of Adam. And if you look at the person to the right, as Michelangelo painted it, that's a figure of God, as Michelangelo envisioned seeing God, and all of those little figures around it supposedly are angels. And Michelangelo has God reaching out with his fingers, as you can see his fingertips, to the man to the left, who is Adam. And Adam is reaching out in turn so that the two fingers are about ready to touch one another. Michelangelo based that fresco on Genesis chapter 1, which says that God created man in his own image, and he also thought of the great hymn that goes back to the 9th and the 10th centuries. In Latin, it's called the Veni Creator Spiritus. We in the Lutheran circles have sung that for centuries in the church. It's a hymn that we call today, "Come Holy Ghost, Creator Blessed." It's in most Protestant churches of today, including the Lutheran Church. But Michelangelo's fresco of the creation of Adam, as he shows the two coming together with their fingertips to touch, depicts how God continues to touch humanity with his grace. What a brilliant mind Michelangelo had, along with Raphael, who helped also in that setting. I don't have another picture of one of the frescoes, but just as a tie-in to this picture that you see up here, this fresco that you see here, another of Michelangelo's masterful paintings is called Original Sin, because as Michelangelo saw in his own heart how God reaches out and touches humanity with grace, he also knew that man would fall into sin. And we know about that in Genesis chapter 3, the story of how sin came into existence soon after God had reached down and picked up the dust of the ground and then blew his breath into it. And now we are part of that dust of the ground called his greatest crown of creation. But in that fresco, Original Sin, Genesis 3 describes Satan's very subtle, clever word poison that he worked into a man's mind. He knew where man's weakness was, up here. And he said to him, I hear that God told you that if you eat of the tree that he told you not to eat of it, you would die. Don't believe him. You won't die. In fact, you're going to be like God. And so what happened out of that is that we have evolved ourselves into the 21st century. And we see this God who reached out to Adam and to mankind touching the fingertips and showing an Easter touch already back then, knowing how sin would take hold of mankind. We see that today too, don't we? How many of you ever seen a person clench his fists like this in anger? That's all too prevalent today. Did you watch the news this past week? And this woman is going up, 68-year-old woman is going up the steps to go into her church, and this thug comes from behind with a clenched fist and knocks her down off of the steps to the cement, unconscious. That's what sin does. Or I think of the young people today in schools, and I hear it all the time. I experienced it as a kid. One kid bullies the other. He's a little bigger. He sees a little one that he can take advantage of, and he bullies them. It's a growing sin of today. And it carries itself even into adulthood as we bully one another in the world of corporations and businesses and so on, and we do it and intimidate in different ways. Or we think about verbal and physical abuse. And the abusive person tries to show power and dominance over another person. Or we hear about men violating the beauty of womanhood. Is it any wonder that so many today in the world today, mostly among women I suspect, often go, "Don't you dare touch me." Thanks be to God that into our world of sin comes an Easter touch from Jesus, who encouraged his disciples on that resurrection evening to come and to see him and to know that he was truly alive and that he was with him, and to know that it was not the only time in Jesus' ministry that wherever he went in his life and his walk from city to city, and he'd meet all kinds of different people in his ministry, and he would say to them, "Come and see." As he reached out among the lepers who were all hidden in isolation in the caves where no one was allowed to go because of their disease of skin. And Jesus would say, "Come and see me. Touch me." And many came and were healed. Or how many of you remember, if you go back years and years to your childhood, and I don't know if you had little books like I did, they had these little Bible story books. You know, you'd open up the book and you'd see pictures and artist drawings of the stories of the Bible. I think of the one Jesus looks at parents who brought their children to Jesus, and Jesus would say, "Come and see me. Touch me." And they would sit on his lap. Or the number of times that Jesus would heal the sick, and he would say, "Come to me. Come and see. Touch me." And so many were healed. I think the Apostle John, he put it best in the epistle that I read at the start of the service today. He put it best before his disciples, and he said, "You know, brothers, we have seen him with our eyes. We have looked at him with our eyes, and we have touched him with our hands." And now we're 21 centuries later than when Jesus walked the face of the earth, and we as a Christian church, we haven't yet seen the risen Lord, have we? But who of us can say that they have not been touched in some way by Jesus? Who of us can not say, "I haven't been embraced by him, I haven't been hugged by him"? We all know that we have. That's the way Jesus and God are. When we're down, there's Jesus waiting for us to pull us back up. "Come and see me," he would say. "Touch me. Know that I'm with you. I'm walking with you. I understand your downs. I understand your valleys that you're walking through. I also understand when you're having a happy time in your life and you're celebrating something great in your family. I understand." I can tell you in my ministry, a long ministry that I've served the Lord in the church, been so privileged and honored by God to do so, I personally have witnessed so many Easter touches in my ministry to embraces and hugs for Christ's people. And I can tell you, I can guarantee you that what I'm saying is true. I have never in my ministry have been in a setting where Jesus was not present. I walk in a hospital and I pray and I read scripture and I reach and I touch and I bless people and I know he's there. I've walked into nursing homes and retirement homes. I've been in settings where people have said to me, "You know what? I'm so filled with worry and anxiety, I can't deal with it. I got a crisis in my home right now that's so overwhelming me, I don't know what to do about it." And I just know that Jesus is waiting next to them to work it out. I've even seen it in church meetings, unfortunately. Devil's playground sometimes. We have a meeting and we all have great intentions, and suddenly we come far short of the glory of God as we resolve things that are in a meeting, and suddenly things begin to fall apart and they go astray, and people say things, do things, react different ways. But I can tell you this, Jesus was sitting in one of those chairs. Something to remember, isn't it? You see, Easter touches from the risen Lord are always part of God's plan in life for us, a plan to come and see him, to see God's gracious hand at work. Now, I don't think I'm naive enough to know that we're living in interesting times of touch. Talk to lawyers sometime and they'll tell you about it. Talk to pastors about it. Talk to teachers who are in classrooms leading children. We're living in interesting times of touch. On the lighter side, if you happen to be maybe a March Madness collegiate basketball junkie of the past 3 days, or you're watching the Masters golf tournament right now on TV, and you see all kinds of touches, don't you? You see the high fives and you see the low fives. You see the lots of the fingers to the elbow antics that are going on, the head to the chest bumps that are going on between athletes, and you see nice job, the pats on the back, and so on down the line. I always think it's kind of like going to a wedding reception and either doing the chicken dance or the hokey pokey or, the Macarena. And, we're doing all kinds of things. But that's always the fluff of life, isn't it? It really doesn't compare to when you lead your hand out to somebody as a hand of welcome. Or during a church service where we share the peace of the Lord with each other during our worship liturgy. Or we've had not a very good experience with somebody that we know very well, maybe in the family, maybe in the church, maybe in business or whatever happens, and we reach out and we just give them a hug that we know that we love them and we forgive them, or they forgive us, or we have a moment of reconciliation. How welcome our Easter touches in these days when things are really out of balance, aren't they? We've kind of lost our focus as we journey in life these days. We're kind of out of the mainstream of what God really intended for us to be as people. I think of our young people today. They walk around with these smartphones like this. You can't go anywhere without seeing a young person without a thing. Working on this and working on that. And they have this ubiquitous smartphone propaganda that just keeps coming over this thing all the time. And it leads to what I call the sursum ad sumum. It's a Latin phrase for the highest level of temptation that can come through such a wonderful gift and miracle as a smartphone. Leads to all kinds of mischief. Leads to all kinds of what I call high-level mischief sometimes. Cultural intimidation. I'm convinced as a pastor over the years that I've worked with young people, still see it today in families that I know and love very much, that our youth of our day today need more than ever a hug and a touch and an ear from their parents. And parents needing a hug and a touch and an ear from their kids. Just think how welcome it would be to have Easter touches that would, I don't know how you feel about this, but it kind of bothers me a little bit too. Just think how an Easter touch would welcome to tamp down the media today and tamp down the politicians and the verbosity, the windedness, the long-windedness that keeps coming out of people today for self-satisfaction. How wonderful an Easter touch would be to just reach out to them and say enough. I think it would be so wonderful, even in a context like the church like yours, a beautiful church, beautiful people. Yes, even in churches, there's oftentimes these perplexing states of behavior that just suddenly rise out of nowhere. How wonderful it would be to just say to one another, you know what? We're the children of God. Peace be with you. I will say to people, I can't show you Jesus, but I can show you what Jesus is like by looking at me. Come and see. My friends, Easter touches are signs of hope, are they not? May I encourage you to keep giving those signs out to people. Use your hands and your feet and your ministries and your conversations to do just that. And let's keep the past that's so important to our life. And let's keep that tied to our present, and let's keep it tied to the future that still waits us as God's people. And in closing, let me give you a personal example of that. You can see up here, I have a Bible. That's my mom's Bible. She was 91 years old when she was sainted by the Lord. And when she passed into her eternal rest, I took this Bible home with me as my ongoing Easter touch of remembrance to her. And then I go through her Bible every once in a while, and I look and I go, my goodness, the things that she kept in her Bible. She must have 20 bookmarks in here that were handed out on Easter Sunday, with always something about Easter in there. She's got religious poems in here. She's even got a picture, believe it or not, of her pastor. And here, they did an article on him in a local newspaper way back when. I was the first baby he ever baptized, believe it or not. He stayed in this church for years upon years upon years, and they loved him dearly. He was a good old German guy, you know. She loved him. We loved him too. There's my dad's funeral bulletin in here. There are bulletins of family celebrations, and this is a Bible that's torn and tattered, and it's got tape around it, and it's holding it together, and I put it on my bookshelves in my study, and every once in a while I pull it out to remember my mom and her devotion to her children and her love and her faithfulness to the Lord. 55 years she taught Sunday school. And I go, boy, I was really blessed to have a mom like that. I tell you that story because you have a counterpart to my story too, don't you? You may have one of these. You may have a hymn book. You may have something that belonged to your parents or somebody in your own family. And I know you see them more as a keepsake or more as nostalgia in your life, as a memory in your life. I would guess that you see them as your sermon. I know you're not ordained like I am, but you do preach yet. You have sermons just like this to tell other people, to remind people of the Easter touch that Jesus is alive, the God who loves you, cares for you, takes care of you, an Easter touch, that you're grateful that people love you and care for you. An Easter touch that reminds you that every time you come to church for communion and you line up down here and you receive the Easter meal of bread and wine to sustain you from one day to the next. Those are the kinds of faith journeys we walk. As you walk with them, with the people here this morning, hand-in-hand ministry, and other people that are not here today, but you know and you're a part of too as a communion of saints. Those hand-in-hand, those Easter touch ministries in our life. The memories of people in your life. Some are no longer with you. And they're just waiting like my mom for the last day. Just like you and I someday are going to wait for the last day too. And come alive. And be with Christ, the risen and ascended Lord, and to see him face to face. Touch. It's such a beautiful thing. You know what? Jesus started it, and we're called to continue it. So come and see. He's risen. He's risen indeed. Hallelujah.